now. Israel has agreed a deal with Hamas for the release of 50 hostages in Gaza in return for Israel freeing 150 Palestinian prisoners. All of these are women and children, and a pause in the fighting as well that will allow some aid into the Gaza Strip. To discuss this in more detail, I'm joined by Wallis Simons. He's editor of the Jewish Chronicle and author of the brilliant book Israel-Phobia. Good morning to you, Jake.
Morning.
Thank you very much indeed for joining us. This deal has been long in the negotiation. I mean, this has been ongoing for a long time. Approval overnight after a very lengthy meeting of this sort of unity government in Israel. There are still some little hurdles to get over, there aren't there? There could be a sort of court challenges by those who've been impacted by those Palestinian prisoners who are being freed, if you've been a victim of the crimes that they've carried out, being able to contest that. But do you think, realistically, this exchange will go ahead?
It looks like it's likely to go ahead. I mean, the point that you raise is a good one. It's important to recognise right from the off that this is not an exchange of equal prisoners. In the Israeli prisons, there are people who've committed crimes and have been tried and are held as a result of that. They've been described in the media, some of them as being children. That just means that they're under the age of 19, not 5-year-olds. On the other side, you've got innocent civilians who've been captured, including 9 or actually a 10-month-old baby now who's been in captivity for more than a month. So that's right. Look, you know, these negotiations are very delicate. It looks like there is the will on both sides for it to happen. It shows how much pressure Hamas is under and how weakened it has been by the confrontation of the last few weeks, because normally it can command more than 1,000 prisoners for one Israeli hostage. Now we're talking about far fewer than that.
Yeah, well, the exchange rate has changed. We'll also talk of a 4-day, not a ceasefire, a 4-day pause in fighting to allow these hostages to be brought out. International Red Cross working, as the intermediary there. But then a possibility of another 24 hours of those pauses in fighting in return for another 10 Hamas hostages a day. Hope that we can get out more than just the 50. It's thought there could be some 90. Lots of different figures bandied around, women and children being held, it's thought. But of course, we've got looking at 240 hostages, vast majority of whom are civilians, still being held by Hamas.
That's right, and not all of them by Hamas, actually. Some of them are held by other groups and indeed by civilians who just got their hand in and grabbed a few while the border was gaping open. I think
once you're holding an Israeli hostage, I think we're counting you as part of Hamas at that point, aren't we?
Well, I mean, you're certainly a belligerent and an enemy, but whether you're a signed-up card-carrying member of the group or not is a different matter. But look, the vast majority are members of Hamas. I think it's important also to recognise that for the public here, we often don't understand how much of a compromise this is for Israel, how much of a sacrifice it is for their own soldiers' security. They've expended a lot of blood and treasure making the progress they've made so far. A pause doesn't just mean a pause. A pause is where Israel stops fighting and Hamas gains surveillance and resupplies, and also prepares the battlefield in the south without Israeli surveillance overhead. Part of the deal was that Israel would give a period of non-aerial surveillance over the south.
Why would Hamas ask for that otherwise? I mean, this is the thing. It's so obvious, isn't it? But the argument had been, against a ceasefire was that only benefits Hamas. Hamas have made it very clear. Given every opportunity, they would carry out an October the 7th style massacre every single day if they could, until every Jewish person was wiped from the map. So, these are not people. We can do business with. They're terrorists. But the pressure has been on Benjamin Netanyahu, not just internally from the families, the loved ones of these terrorists, these hostages, to get them home, particularly, of course, the huge number of children taken, but also pressure internationally, hasn't there, to allow more aid in, to be seen to take this route, even though we know the benefit will be to Hamas from this.
That's right. And look, I think from the international community's point of view, they don't really see the costs that Israel would incur in this ceasefire. And as you rightly pointed out, Hamas are not a trusted actor in any way. For a start, Israel tries to uphold morality and Hamas tries to use Israel's high standards against it, to weaponize Israel's morality against it. But also, if we look back to 2014, a ceasefire was agreed by the UN between Israel and Hamas. And within a few hours of that, Hamas ambushed a soldier and killed Hadar Goldin and still holds his dead body as a bargaining chip 9 years on.
Yeah.
So these are not people who can be trusted who are acting in any way in good faith. From Israel's point of view, you're right. A strategic objective is to minimize civilian casualties. It's so harmful to its international reputation, in addition to the humanitarian imperative to protect life. Yeah. A strategy is forming to get the civilians to go to the southwest by the border with Egypt, where they can perhaps some sort of camp can be set up. They can receive treatment just over the border in Egypt. And maybe some aid ships can be brought in, led by the French perhaps, anchoring off Gaza to give them that help, meaning that they will be kept out of the way of the fighting. Israel wants to protect civilian life and is doing everything that it can to do so. And as we know, Hamas is wanting...
And it's very, very simple. You know, all of this could be resolved today if they wanted. The Hamas fighters, they could get and the terrorist leadership who are living in their multi-million-pound homes in Qatar, sheltered by that horrible regime. I don't know why they're treated as if they are some way neutral parties. They clearly aren't. They could give up, you know, their weaponry. They could give up the hostages. They could stop having, you know, attacking Israel, and the Palestinian people wouldn't be facing what they're facing right now.
Yeah, not only is that entirely true, but none of this would have happened at all if, after Israel withdrew in 2005, Hamas would actually have been reasonable, not have enacted a coup, not have gripped the population in a jihadi death cult, but instead pursued the avenue of peace and economic development and security for its citizens. You could have had pretty much open borders and a kind of Singapore on the Mediterranean there by now. And let's not forget that none of this at all would have happened if the Palestinians would have accepted a two-state solution in 1947 when they were first offered it.
Indeed, indeed. Absolutely. Jake Wallis Simons, really appreciate you joining us, editor of the Jewish Chronicle and author of Israelophobia. Thank you for that. Well worth getting that book if you want to understand what's going on there.